Exploring Stories. The Unresolved Case of Septic Tank Sam. Imagine being known only by a name someone else gave you. Septic Tank Sam. For over 4 decades, a man's identity was lost, buried in a gruesome mystery that haunted a small Canadian town in Alberta. But today, we know his true name, and it only took 40 years. Gordon Edwin Sanderson, a man whose life was as tragic as the way it ended. Born on October 22nd, 1950 in Manitoba, Gordy was an Indigenous man who endured a life shaped by pain and struggle. He was one of the many children torn from their families during the 60s scoop, a practice that separated thousands of Indigenous children from their culture, placing them into foster care. Gordy was only 9 years old when he was taken from his family. As an adult, Gordy battled addiction and had numerous run-ins with the law. In the 1970s, he lived in Edmonton, hoping to reconnect with his brother Arthur, who was in Calgary. But unfortunately, fate had other plans. Fast forward 7 years to 1977. A couple in Lynbrook, Alberta, made a horrifying discovery on their abandoned property. While scavenging for a septic tank pump, they found Gordon's decomposed body submerged in a 1.8 meter deep septic tank. He was wrapped in a yellow bedsheet and tied down with a nylon rope. The scene before them was shocking, tragic, and disgusting. When the authorities arrived to the septic tank site, they decided that the best way to remove the body would be to empty the septic tank. In order to do so, they gathered one ice cream bucket, and they began emptying slowly, scoop by scoop. Once the septic tank was emptied, they retrieved Mr. Gordy's body and they sent it off to the medical examiners for a full autopsy. Unfortunately, the police had no identifications to go off of, there was no wallet, and the body was too badly decomposed, so they called him Septic Tank Sam. The first roadblock that the medical examiners ran into was, in fact, identifying Mr. Gordy's gender. He was so severely mutilated that it took several months to positively identify him as a man. Next, the examiners had accidentally identified him as a Caucasian male. His bone and teeth suggested he suffered from an unspecified illness at least 5 years old, and it was clear that his cause of death was 2 gunshots. One to the head and one to the chest. It was possible that he could have been shot more or even cut or sliced. However, since his body was in such a bad state as mentioned, the only way to know if he had sustained trauma was by the indents created on his bone from the bullet impact or by a knife slicing into his bone. Furthermore, looking at the remaining skin as well as the burn marks on his shirt sleeves, it indicates that he was most likely tied down and burnt with a butane torch and cigarettes. Moving away from the medical examiner's office, we turn our eyes to the investigators who were hard at work trying to discover the final moments before Gordy's murder. The septic tank, being fully cleared out, provided no leads for the investigators. Almost all of the biological and organic evidence was completely destroyed by the septic sewage or was unusable with the technology at the time. There was no fingerprints, no weapon. All they had was what Gordy's body was wrapped in, as well as his clothes. Looking around the property, they made a quick discovery that this place was clearly just dumping ground. Just to use the septic, there was no evidence that Gordy was tortured at the site. To them, what they believed was Gordy was tortured somewhere within the community, potentially a farm. After the torture was done, they wrapped up his body, brought him to an area that they knew was abandoned, and they placed his body into the septic tank. And that's really it. That's all they knew. They knew he had been shot 2 times from the medical office, they knew that it was a dumping ground, and they knew that he was murdered somewhere else. And you would probably be telling yourself, wow, that information probably took them a week to find? Nope, took them 2 years. So we move forward from 1977 to 1979. Gordy has already been buried in an unmarked grave at an Edmonton cemetery, as no one has come forward to claim his body. It's now where the examiners are going to exhume his body and send him out from his unmarked grave to Oklahoma, where Clyde Snow and Petty Bat Galef, forensic anthropologists and medical illustrators, are going to attempt to create a facial reconstruction. It was actually both of these forensic anthropologists that had looked at his remains and determined that the RCMP's belief that Sanderson was Caucasian and between the ages of 26 and 32 were most likely wrong. They believed he was indigenous and around 35 years old. After completing a facial reconstruction over a couple days, they sent his body back to Edmonton to place him in his unmarked grave. And in all honesty, I'm not sure if the technology was just new or not very good, but I'm going to put the comparison of the facial reconstruction versus his face. I genuinely think it is super ass, and no wonder nobody came forward claiming they know who this is, because I have no words. It just does not look like the man at all. It looks like a white mannequin. You would think that would be the end of the desecration of his body, however, it was not. He was later exhumed, and another facial reconstruction was made in 2000 by Cyril Chan, and unfortunately I was unable to find a photo of his facial reconstruction at the time. So we went from 1979 exhuming his body the first time, to the year 2000 exhuming his body for a second time, and then we move forward to the year 2021. On June 29th, 2021, it was reported that the remains had been identified finally via genetic genealogy, only a crisp 44 years after its discovery. Police had submitted his DNA to Authoring Incorporated, which was a private laboratory, who had positively identified a 100% match to his DNA. It was Sanderson's older sister. So obviously, the moment everybody discovered that there was a dead body in a septic tank on an abandoned property, all the farmers and the townspeople went to their septic tanks and looked to see if, there was a major abundance of dead bodies. Of course, Mr. Gordon's body was the only one. Going through the historical books, looking forward and in the past, there was no records indicating that multiple people were being found or killed or disappearing, meaning it wasn't a serial killer or a murderer on the loose. That leaves to the last thing, rumors. People speculate that Sam was murdered in the way he was by multiple individuals. Potentially, Sam was a perpetrator of a sex crime towards somebody. I'm not going to get into specifics on that or attempt to smear the name of Sam, but I'm just trying to give a little bit of context here. Potentially, he had committed a crime against somebody and they sought revenge against him. Or in the most extreme cases, he may have had a partner who was very unstable and he could have been unfaithful to that person, which led them to commit a heinous act. And that brings us to the end of our story of Sam the Man in a Septic. Thank you so much for your time tonight. If you still are listening, please consider subscribing, commenting, or leaving a like. It helps the channel grow. Thank you so much all for your support. We've hit 350 subscribers. I'm looking to hit 500 subscribers, so any support to the channel really means a lot to me. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your night.